My wife is autistic and is excessively flirting with her coworker, and I feel like I'm being gaslit that she's not. My wife and I have been together for 10 years, married for nearly 5, and we have a 3-year-old son. We are fairly happy, although we have been undergoing couples counseling for the past 6 months as we found being parents very challenging. We've been making a lot of progress with our communication lately, but today that all fell apart. My wife has autistic traits that run in both of our families, and I have ADHD, so we are a neurodivergent couple. That's probably relevant here. My wife recently moved back into our shared office as we both work from home. Today, she hopped on a video call with a guy from work whom she is friends with, and I stepped out to take a quick call about something. After my call finished, I sat scrolling through Reddit for a bit but could hear their conversation, and it increasingly made me uncomfortable. My wife sounded like a completely different person. She would tut and giggle before she said anything, constantly joking with him in every sentence. She was energetic, and it all just sounded so incredibly flirty. He had called her not for anything work-related, but to tell her he had taken a new job in the city closest to us. He currently lives far away. She said things like, "Do me a favor, when that job contract comes, just rip it up so you don't have to leave, and, as long as you are always available for me on Microsoft Teams." They then went on to confirm they had each other on WhatsApp, etc., all the while joking about various things and giggling in a way that I never hear her do, ever. They talked for 20 minutes, and I almost started to record them so she could hear herself back, but they said goodbye just after I started. It just made me feel so gross listening to it. This isn't the first time I've noticed their flirtatiousness, and I brought it up last year after she started that new job. They were calling each other outside work hours, and she added him on PlayStation. They would sit and game together in the evenings, chatting away with the same giggly, flirty tone. She talked about him a lot, telling me many personal things about his childhood, parents, and stuff. It caused issues when I brought up that it made me feel uncomfortable, especially one night when we were supposed to have time together, but she just forgot and spent the night playing with him. She denies flirting at all and just says he's a work friend. Around that time, she traveled to the central office, and I know he had invited her for dinner at his place, which hadn't happened in the end, I think because I said I wasn't comfortable with that. They did end up still going for dinner in the city together, though, as friends. The thing is, I'm not a jealous person. Over the years, my wife has had a few crushes, one of them being my university roommate who's like a younger brother to me. It's kind of a running joke that they both fancy each other a bit, and I genuinely don't mind and think it's funny. We joke about having intimacy with him one day, etc. I do know that she is prone to the occasional crush, and I don't take it seriously, but once or twice over the decade, I have felt like I had to point out some boundaries. So, back to today, after they finished their call, I said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" When I mentioned that she probably wouldn't like what I was about to say, she immediately got defensive, walked off, and said she wasn't going to have this conversation. Since I hadn't even said anything yet, that intuitively tells me that some part of her knows that the way she was talking was probably a bit inappropriate. I got upset and said I was feeling uncomfortable with the way she was talking with him again, that it sounds like heavy flirting to me. I mentioned that I would feel uncomfortable if I talked to another woman at work like that, or if a girl talked to me like that. Even as a clueless guy, I would be getting a strong vibe that she fancies me. I expressed that I feel hurt by it and that if she talked like that to me, it would be a dream come true. She basically dismissed it all very defensively and said she wasn't flirting at all, that I just didn't want her to be friends with him. She mentioned that she doesn't understand what she's done wrong and that she's fed up with me being like this, even though I haven't spoken to her about this since last summer, and I've never been jealous in our 10-year relationship. I felt like I'm being gaslit, as it seems like such obvious flirting, and she's just dismissing it as all in my head. It caused a massive argument. I'm willing to admit that me getting upset about it is likely some insecurity. But at the same time, I feel like I know what I heard, and that I'm an understanding person. I'm okay with crushing, but this just crosses a line. I should be able to say that, no? I think it's likely something to do with my wife's autistic traits and not understanding the social norms or boundaries. I don't know. She doesn't realize how flirty she's being sometimes. I think that's definitely true. I wish she would flirt with me by accident a bit more. Is it okay for me to feel upset by this? Or am I being controlling or irrational? Update 1. I ended up showing my wife the post I had written, and it was incredibly validating to feel like I wasn't going insane. We had a really difficult conversation about it all, and we were both so angry at each other until she told me the truth. In a rather heated moment, she kind of venomously said something like, "I like talking to him because when I do, I feel happy and relaxed. Like I can be myself. Which is something I can never feel when I'm around you." This really made me sad, and I instantly wasn't angry anymore. I just apologized and told her how that's just what I wanted her to feel around me again. That feeling of being herself is something she had lost after becoming a mom and the difficult few years we've had in COVID, etc. We never had any help being parents from our extended families, and so we never have time together for ourselves. She didn't have any feelings for him beyond friendship, and I do think she was genuinely being naive and also a little willingly ignorant about him pushing boundaries. A few examples came out after we talked about it. For example, at one time, he had asked to come back to her hotel room to continue chatting after a work party. This was also due to her autism, as well as not fully understanding where the boundary is. But when we looked at the big picture, she could see and did admit that she had unwittingly begun down the path of some kind of emotional affair, which she didn't really know was a thing. She took responsibility for this and did stop talking to the guy, telling him that she would only be talking to him if required for work purposes from then on. He left that job very shortly after, so that was also easier for us. Funnily enough, it did come out after he left that he had made some advances and been awkward with a few other of my wife's colleagues. People noticed at work that my wife had stopped being friendly with him and were asking, was it because he was being awkward with you as well? Kind of thing. We talked a lot in counseling about it. I think a massive problem that I had to acknowledge was that she had got to a place where she expected me to be angry and irritated by things, because that is definitely something I have struggled with. So she had begun hiding stuff in fear of how I would respond. She didn't feel like she could talk to me about stuff. When she did admit to her wrongdoings and acknowledged she had begun to push me away and prioritize things above our relationship, she was surprised at how kind, patient, and forgiving I was. I was surprised too. We kind of figured out that a lot of the anger and irritation were often because I could tell that I wasn't getting the whole truth. That's all I wanted, her to be straight with me so I know where I stand. That, and my feelings to be acknowledged, both of which are a massive trigger for me. We started doing things like having a take back of the day where if one of us said or did something we later regretted, then we could apologize and call it our take back. And we both agreed that we would forgive and forget those, with no exceptions. We found that it worked amazingly to develop compassion and understanding for one another. We also began working on having date nights every Friday and having difficult conversations with 100% honesty while sitting together, looking at each other, and holding hands so that we were connecting and feeling listened to. This was prescribed by our therapist because she told us that when we both get triggered, we have a tendency to dissociate, turn away from each other, and get stuck in a place where we can't hear what the other is saying. That was really tricky at times, but we've gotten pretty good at it now, and whenever we start struggling, we are very conscious to make physical contact and look at each other so we can hear and be heard. We took a break from counseling over the summer holidays because we decided we needed some time to process, and we ended up having an amazing summer. We went back for a therapy session last week, which we thought was about starting a second round. We were a bit nervous because we'd been so happy and didn't want to stir anything up. But the therapist could see how happy and good things have been, so she told us not to come back, not unless we wanted to in the future. And it's true, we have been the happiest we have ever been. We are really close again. Our communication is so much better. Our understanding and compassion for each other and our quirks, triggers, etc., are at an all-time high. We look out for when the other is struggling and step in where we can. When we miss it and the other has a meltdown or does something unkind, we are much better able to forgive and forget using our take-backs, and just having more understanding and compassion for each other's strengths and weaknesses. I think it's fair to say that although some boundaries were being crossed, my wife was only at the very beginning of the path that leads to a full-blown emotional affair. Nothing had really happened. And there were no feelings my wife had beyond an exciting friendship with someone who gave her some nice attention, though he definitely had ulterior motives. So we were lucky to catch it when we did. That being said, the root cause was definitely our bad communication, negative behavioral loops that we had gotten into, and the degradation of our romantic relationship from becoming new parents over the last 4 years. There was a lot to learn and a lot of effort and willingness required on our parts to fix the issue and move forward. Hopefully, some of you can read this and learn a few things to help your relationships. If I had to recommend one thing, it would be the take back of the day.